So I promised a special guest, and today we are very, very fortunate. We have a UI engineer, a senior UI engineer from PayPal. And unless you think that Node is not used in a real-world enterprise-heavy scenario, I wanted to bring someone from a reputable company that you may have heard of, and have him share with you their perspective on how Node is used and some of the lessons learned and all that good stuff. Is that cool? Do you guys have any questions? And by the way, tweet to BizSpark at BizSpark, because they're the ones who made this thing possible. The food, the people, bring Eric in, and all the good stuff. All right, so Eric, I'll let you take it away.
Great, thanks.
You bet.
So I'm Eric Toth. I'm with PayPal. To give you a little bit of background about me, I've been with PayPal for about 1.5 years. Was brought in at a very interesting time at the company. I guess before I start, you'll see this theme a little bit, and I'll explain it a little bit later. So I joined PayPal about 1.5 years ago. I'm sure people have, PayPal has not always had the most glamorous publicity in the world. It's not necessarily something, a company that people see as totally innovative all the time. But when I was brought in by a former boss that I had that said, we're going to change the way PayPal works from the inside out. There's some really exciting stuff that's happening there. And we can really make that company an interesting place to work, create interesting products that delight users, all that stuff. PayPal is growing fast, so it's not like it's a place where you can stop the world, rewrite everything, and then pick up where you left off. It doesn't really work that way. But new leadership was coming in. We had some new, maybe fewer restrictions on what we could do, a little more greenfield opportunities. And competition was coming fast. We got companies like Stripe, lots of different payment companies trying to eat our lunch, essentially. And like I said, we weren't a company that was considered innovative all the time. But when all these things came together, new leadership, new pressures, we decided it's time to make some changes. And that's kind of where Node started coming up in conversations. So, yep.
So the godfather of JavaScript is Douglas Crawford. He's at PayPal. Do you work with Douglas Crawford?
So I do. Doug's working on something a little bit different. He's focused a lot on evangelism. He's actually focused a lot on JavaScript security now. So there's a lot of questions that come up around the Node area of things, especially at the enterprise level. So yeah, Doug is awesome. He gives talks for us. He's putting together a lot of talks that he's going to be doing outside of PayPal too. So all this stuff. So this happened about 1 year ago. We got a new president named David Marcus, and he decided we need to change the way that PayPal works. We need to reinvent our checkout platform. So myself and one of my coworkers were tasked with prototyping, with building the front end for this new checkout experience. We decided, all right, well, we see this old stack. We've got this humongous Java stack. It's very monolithic, difficult to get up and running. It takes days to get a developer ready to build something. We decided, all right, we're going to start using Node. We're just going to build this application on top of Node, see how far we get. We run into something, see where we can go from there. And like I said, we had the benefit of great timing with how architecture was done at PayPal. Why did we choose Node at the time? So Node has some pretty clear benefits right off the top, right? One thing that I like to say, one metric that I like for getting developers up to speed is time to first commit. So you come into a company or you start working on a product, how fast can you commit code? I mean, if you're working on a project and you don't do anything productive for weeks, you're not really going to enjoy your work. It's not going to be something that is fruitful for everyone. You're not going to be excited about working. So we decided Node, it's fast. We can get prototypes out. We can work with the designers in real time. We can build products incredibly quickly. And kind of before I go on that trend, it's kind of interesting if anybody has listened to talks by other companies or by Daniel Shaw, the guys at Walmart Labs. So they are, one thing I'll preface is they're looking at Node from a service perspective, we've been looking at Node from a customer experience perspective, from a web application kind of front-end web application perspective. So for us, building UIs is critical. Getting things in front of people that they're able to interact with has been huge. And based on those things, we got noticed, right? We can build something, we can put it in front of the president of the company within a day for have them evaluate it. We can make changes, put it in front of customers. You know, every week we would go to user experience testing. And you know, at the end of the day, I think this is why we're all here, is that Node is actually fun to work on. It's not like, it's not painful, right? You don't come to something on a Saturday because you have to. You come because you enjoy either writing code, like making things work, and Node gets out of your way and enables you to do that. And one of the things, you know, I mentioned before, we have a metric of time to first commit. I think something that was even more useful for turning people onto Node at PayPal was time to first request. I can set up a server and serve pages in minutes. It's not, I need to write, you know, I need to go get Spring and set up Spring MVC and then get an ant build going to build this Java UI. It's like you write a basic server, npm install express, give it a template, you've got something on the screen that people can use, and you can actually do your work. It gets out of the way, especially if you're a front-end engineer. You know, based on that, and it's kind of funny, there's another kind of side effect of Node is that other engineers that typically write in Java get kind of interested in it and jealous of it. And part of that is because life is asynchronous, and services are asynchronous, and requests are asynchronous, and the UI is asynchronous. When you try and take all that stuff and shove it onto a synchronous language and a synchronous platform, you have to think about things slightly differently than how they behave in the real world. And the internet and everything is async. Java, unless you learn how to write threads or you're on the bleeding edge, it's synchronous. It doesn't always make sense, and it makes it really hard to write applications that perform, well, I wouldn't say perform well, that's not fair, but that behave in the way that you would think they would. So, you know, Node comes in and you know, you guys are going to be doing web-based applications. Everything else in the world is asynchronous too. I don't know, you know, if you guys start getting more into Node and start enjoying what you're doing, look at things like Raspberry Pis. Like async programming at the hardware level is pretty amazing stuff too. Nodecopter, absolutely awesome stuff, right? Like life is async. You start learning Node, you start understanding how like to make modules work together, how to make services work together, how to talk to hardware. Suddenly, amazing things are opened up, amazing possibilities are opened up to you that may not be opened up otherwise. So anyway, enough kind of excitement about Node. What were the side effects of bringing Node into the company? Well, there's a lot of excitement, right? Like a lot of people thought, awesome, we can start building things quickly. We don't have to wait for you know, all of our environment to get set up, whatever. But there was also jealousy. There were people that unfortunately have to work on other products, and they're like, you guys are doing some really sexy work over there, and that's a bummer that we don't get to be a part of it. There are some people that were totally skeptical of it, right? Like, especially at PayPal. PayPal moves money. It's a financial company. There's a lot of stuff at stake if you do the wrong thing, if you take the wrong path. So rightfully so, there should be some skepticism there. And it's kind of my responsibility then to address those skeptics or those points and help find ways to solve them. You know, I think a bigger thing than that, though, is suddenly we have engagement from everybody in the company. You bring something like this up, and it seems, and it is accessible to a lot of engineers, and it helps engineers kind of come out of the woodwork a little bit. When you put somebody on technology that they don't necessarily like, they're just going to do it and they go home. But then when you introduce something that's exciting, that can help them work quickly and they're actually interested in working with, they actually start engaging with other teams. They start engaging with your team, with my team in this case. Like, suddenly you're starting to build an ecosystem and a culture around this technology and this platform that, at least at PayPal, we hadn't had before. But another thing that it did do for us, and probably for large systems, it exposed flaws in our architecture. You make assumptions sometimes about how you build services or how you interact with other systems, and some of those assumptions are based on technology you have at the time. So when you introduce something new, like Node, that does a lot of async stuff, and you have an architecture built around certain synchronous assumptions, suddenly you expose design flaws in the old system. And those are things that we had to address, we're going to have to address moving forward. But an interesting side effect of that, and I know that there's engineers here from all kinds of backgrounds, is that this move helps our overall design be better, and it helps us be technology agnostic. And a big benefit for us at PayPal, and something that we're pushing, is not to build the whole organization around Node, is to make the whole organization technology agnostic, such that it's not specifically built tailored to Java, it's not specifically built tailored to Python or anything else. And suddenly you have an incredibly flexible architecture that anybody can work with. So from there, what did we do? So we needed to get our feet wet. We had started doing prototyping, we had started building these awesome UIs, but that doesn't mean much until you can put customer traffic against it and get people using your products. So we started with a couple of lightweight applications. One was an API browser that my coworker Jeff built in about, I don't know, a day, maybe a day and a half. And the other one was this Windows 8 integration. This was actually how Steve got my name. I worked with the Windows 8 team to enable PayPal checkout integration in Windows 8, Windows Store applications. So we have a proxy service that the API or the SDK talks to that's written in Node. That is essentially Marshall's request from applications to our internal checkout products. And then we looked at how do you solve things like NPM and Bower for the enterprise, because we have code that we don't want necessarily on public GitHub, but we don't want to have to prevent everybody from being able to talk to public GitHub. So we actually use Node to solve that problem. Just like NPM is written in Node, we use Node to write our own NPM proxy. And then other tooling. There's a lot of problems, a lot of things that are done manually in every company. Writing tooling is super easy in Node, especially, and you guys will hopefully maybe talk about it a little bit more later, but the whole Unix philosophy around streams with Node is incredibly powerful. And you can do some amazing stuff in not a lot of time just by learning. Like, if you learn streams, it takes you to a whole nother level of productivity. And then as part of that whole progression and kind of getting our feet wet and trying out new products, we brought Azure into the mix. And you guys will experience today, deploying to Azure is pretty incredible. If you had asked me, even a year ago when I started working on Node, there's companies like Joyent. I think OpenStack is doing this now too for other platforms. Doing a git push and suddenly looking at your code live in a stable environment, and you're not having to worry about things like cluster or handling multiple processes or anything. Like, Azure takes care of so many awesome things to help you build or deploy an application. It was pretty amazing. So, and actually, a lot of our product teams that are doing prototyping now, just when they build, they push to Azure. They don't worry about doing like finding servers in-house. We prototype and we push to Azure because it's super easy. So coming back to the logo. So after we did all of these products, we put a couple of products out. We tried out what deployments look like. We see how Node fits at PayPal. Then it became a proper program. So Kraken is the name of the program to make Node a first-class technology citizen at PayPal, integrating all of our services, creating the right abstractions, and building the right tooling for our developers to start writing their products on Node. So this is actually one of the more interesting things to me. Node.js is a really awesome forcing function for things that has an amazing community built around it. And it's really hard not to let that community aspect leak into your organization. So, companies like Stripe that are a lot smaller and able to move a lot more quickly, those developers are a lot of times open source developers. They're engaged in technology communities. And one of the things that we've noticed by bringing in Node is we're engaged as small open source projects inside of our company, engaging with other teams that operate as small open source projects. And you guys will look at NPM and building modular node modules, if that makes sense, later on today. Those are really powerful things for helping build large applications, sharing code, and then the community aspect comes in where suddenly everybody's working together, but they're not necessarily, and then it breaks down silos. So you're working together, you're sharing code, you're contributing to other people's code within the company, and the overall application, the overall architecture just gets better with that. So I know that's not a node-specific thing, but that's kind of one of the more exciting aspects for us. So where does that leave us? So now we're working on Kraken. We've got our first product is going to be launched in June. Our first full-scale product is going to be launched in June. And we're taking an interesting approach. We're building it in both Java and Node to kind of do a bake-off. It's not to say that Node's going anywhere. It's just to evaluate things honestly. Look at them, how they're both architected, where the pitfalls are in one system over another, and then we're going to go from there. So yeah, the trial run is in the future, continuing to tune our deployment strategies, kind of the whole ecosystem around it. And at the end of the day, I mean, as a front-end engineer, we want to be able to build our UI. We want to be able to iterate quickly, and we want to be able to deliver great customer experiences, and make the best products possible. And Node is definitely helping us to do that. So that's it. I don't know if anybody has any questions, interested in anything. Yeah?
Question. What version of Node.js are you using?
So when we first started the program, we were on 0.8.21. We just now rolled out 0.10.4 everywhere. For HTTP stuff, there's some nice enhancements in 0.10. So because we're a little bit early and there's a smaller team working on it right now, we're able to move a little more quickly with revving our versions. But we'll have that'll slow down a little bit. We'll have a much more strict upgrade plan moving forward. Yeah.
So my background is in Java, so just to give you context, but in your case, do you use Node.js primarily as a front-end server for rendering logic, or does it have business logic to connect with the back-end data store so that it's NoSQL or a traditional relational database?
So we're right now using it for front-end products. The Windows 8 integration was a proxy, so it didn't have a front end, but it didn't talk directly to any data source. And I don't know that we have any plans for it to talk directly to data. If anything else, we'll use it. I don't know if you're familiar with QLIO out of eBay. It's a query language-based orchestration layer. So front-end web applications can talk to it, and it in turn orchestrates calls to lower-level services. The teams that are in charge of those types of services have looked at Node. I think they're looking at a lot of different languages and platforms at this point, but right now we have such a high investment in Java at that level, and at that layer, it's you can't move quite as quickly for obvious reasons. So to say where they're going, I'm not exactly positive.
Can I just ask one follow-up question?
Sure.
What's the data protocol exchange between Java and Node.js?
So when we're adapting, so in the past we've had a proprietary binary protocol. We're just moving to JSON.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. Yeah.
You mentioned Express. Have you considered, have you evaluated any other framework?
So we've looked at a few frameworks. When we first started this, Express was kind of the big boy on the block. Happy has since come out, which is by Aaron Hammer at Walmart Labs and his team. That looks really nice. That one doesn't have as much support for UI rendering yet. That was mainly made for service endpoints. There's Getty, which came out not too recently, but it's a little bit newer than Express. I think one of the reasons that we went with Express is we like the middleware pipelining. Some people don't like it so much, but it does help us to hook in a lot of business stuff without having to settle every developer in the company with it. There's just boilerplate stuff that you have to do for each request, for example. and the community around it is big. So that's another thing that is kind of a cornerstone of our program, is we don't necessarily want to be in the business of building frameworks. We want to take stuff that people know or can learn easily that's existing in the community. I mean, it helps for recruiting, right? Like if you say, we want to hire somebody that knows Node, that knows Express, that knows Bower, that knows Bootstrap and Backbone, that's a lot easier than saying we want somebody that knows JavaScript and then we're going to spend 6 weeks training them on proprietary software. So Express has a great community. It was another aspect to why we chose it. And actually since we chose it, Express 3 had come out, so we kind of did some refactoring to accommodate Express 3. Some nice improvements there. But that's not to say that we won't change in the future. It's just for us right now, it was the right thing, and we've invested time in it, so we're going to stick with it for a while. Yeah?
Node is very efficient in terms of front end. Do you think how far away Node can be used for back end to write business logic much more faster, even faster than Scala?
I don't know. I guess it all depends, right? It all depends on the business logic. It depends on a lot of factors. There's an article out recently that said that people should start reconsidering using Node for CPU-intensive tasks. Nodes, and this is just me speaking my opinion, their goal is not necessarily to do everything. It's to make it easy to make everything work together. So if you write application logic in Scala and you still want to expose that application to your network as a service via Node, that should be simple, right? If you want to try and do actual work in Node, you can try it. You can see how far you go. CPU-bound, like heavy CPU-intensive work, traditionally not necessarily been its wheelhouse. But it all depends on the work that you're trying to do, what your business logic is.
So the reason I'm asking this question is because the Node interpolation engine, scripting engine is very efficient.
Yep.
So it might be even faster than Scala or Java's virtual machine interpolation. So bytecode comparison even faster than that. So that's probably someday it will be even more efficient or faster than Java, Scala, or those kind of language for backend.
It could be. I've seen certain comparisons for performance. I think they all end up being biased in one way or the other because the person has a specific test that they write, and you could write tests to favor one over the other, for example. But I guess the nice thing about Node is that it doesn't matter what you write it in, because Node can generally talk to it. So you can write it now. I mean, if it's modular, you can write it now in Scala. You can convert it to Node, and as long as you follow some basic conventions, swapping out implementations should be pretty straightforward. But
do you mind if we move ahead? We have quite a few, 3 hours more content. So, but Eric's around, so feel free to pick him and pick his brain. All right, Eric, thank you very much.
Thanks.